So the way it's set up right now, when we roll our die in our game, all it does is debug our number that we rolled to the console. While that is enough for us to be able to tell what we've rolled, we can actually add a little bit more feedback on the screen to do that. So what we're going to do is code an animation that's actually going to allow us to show off what our die rolling looks like and then what numbers we actually rolled from our die. Let's go ahead and open up that game manager script. And we have a pretty substantial amount of code to do here, so we're going to go pretty quickly. So feel free to pause the video to catch up. I'll go over things as I type here, but this is probably the longest coding step of the project. So we're going to try to get through it as quickly as we can. So at the start here in our variables, we're going to add some space. We're going to add a public image array. So we add those square brackets. We're going to call this dice. We're also going to add a public sprite array with a capital S. We're going to call this die sprites. And that's going to hold the images of our dice, and then we're going to swap them in on that image component there. Now between awake and roll dice, we are going to add a coroutine called dice animation. So we say enumerator dice animation. Open and close parentheses, and this is going to take into integer values the value of the die that we get in roll dice. So we're going to say int die1 and int die2. Then we're going to add our curly brackets. Inside here, we're going to say dice, and then our square brackets 0, so the die, or the die at our 0 index here. We're going to enable it, so we're going to say enabled equals true. Oops, not that. Enabled equals true, there we go. And then with our little line there right at the end of our code, we're going to just tap Control D to duplicate that line and replace the 0 with a 1. So now we've enabled both of our dice. Next up, we're going to say float animation time equals time.time plus 3f. This is going to be how long our animation takes to play. And then float animation delay equals 0.01f. That's going to be how long it takes for us to swap those dice sprites out. And that's going to increase every time we swap one out. And you'll see what I mean here in a second. So next up, we're going to say while. This is a while loop. While time.time is less than animation time. And then curly brackets after that, we're going to say dice 0.sprite equals die sprites. And then our square brackets random.range. And then an open and close parentheses 0, die sprites dot length. And then semicolon. So that's going to pick a random sprite from our array of sprites and assign it to our dice images sprite value. Next, we're going to duplicate that line the same way we did before by clicking at the end and tapping Control or Command D, but we're going to replace the 0 with a 1. So now we're going to swap out the sprites on both of our die images. And we're going to say yield, return new, wait for seconds, animation delay. Oops, not animation. Animation, I hate when it does that. Animation delay, there we go, and then a semicolon, and then we're going to say animation delay plus equals animation delay over 2. And what that's going to do is make it so our animation delay increases slightly every time we swap out those sprites so that we can kind of have it slow down as we approach our final number. Then outside of the while loop, we're going to say dice 0.sprite equals die sprites die1 minus 1, and the reason we're subtracting 1 here is that our die value is between 1 and 7, right? So 7 is excluded in this random.range, which means the value can actually be between 1 and 6. But in an array, we actually start at the value of 0. So the number that we would associate with the 1 on our die is going to be at the 0 index in our array. So we subtract 1 there. Again, we're going to tap at the end and press Control D to duplicate our line. We're going to swap out the 0 with a 1. And then on die 1, we're going to swap out our 1 with a 2. That's going to allow us to replace the sprite on our second die. We're then going to say yield return new wait for seconds, then an open and close parentheses animation time. So we're going to reuse that animation time variable, and then we're going to say we're going to copy our 2 lines from the top here, our dice enabled lines, copy both of them and paste them down to the bottom. We're going to set those equal to false. And that's going to turn those dice back off 3 seconds after they get to their final number. Finally, what we have to do is drop down into the roll dice method. This is where we're actually rolling those dice. And underneath where it says total value equals die1 plus die2, we're going to press enter and add some space. Let's say start coroutine, open and close parentheses, dice animation, another set of open and close parentheses, die1, comma, die2. That's going to pass those values that we random in this method. It's going to pass them to our animation method. And that's all we need to script, but we have to head back over to the editor now. And you're going to see in the game manager component, there's going to be two more variables here, our dice variable and our die sprites. We're going to set dice to 2, just like that. And then in our canvas, we're going to have this dice canvas here with the die1 and die2 images on it. We're going to, we actually need to create these. I forgot to delete them, so I'm going to delete them now. We need to right-click on Canvas, go to UI, and select Canvas. We're going to rename this to Dice, just like that, and delete our Canvas scalar object. There we go. And then we're going to go to UI and create 2 images. We're going to name this one to Die1, and then duplicate our Die1 by selecting it and then pressing Controller Command D, and then rename this one to Die2. So then we're going to drag die1 into element 0 and die2 into element 1. Another thing we need to do is select both of our dies here. So hold control and click die1 and die2. Give it a pos y of 500. And then die1, we're going to give a pos x of negative 100 and die2 a pos x of positive 100. Now again, select both of our die one more time by holding control and clicking on both. We're going to disable the image component here. And now we've got those assigned. We want to do one more thing to our die component here. We're going to select both of our die. We're going to go into the sprites folder in resources, find the one that says dice, and you're going to click this little play button. And that's going to reveal to us our 5 die sprites. We're going to drop the dice 0 one, the one that's just the 1. We're going to drop that into our image component for both so that they just start both set to 1. Now we're going to select our game manager. We're going to set the die sprites array to a size of 6. And then we're going to drag each of these in order from top to bottom. So dice 0, dice 1, dice 2, dice 3, dice 4, and dice 5. Now with all those assigned, if we hit the play button, select our number of players, hit roll dice, our die will animate, and then we see we rolled a 9 in the bottom left, and then the die will appear with the 9 that we rolled at the top of our screen. And then the die disappears. So you've got a little bit of feedback about what your dice are actually rolling.